Why we are trapped in the self-illusion, a Buddhist perspective. There's a voice inside you right now. It never stops, commenting, judging, planning, remembering. From wake to sleep, it narrates your life, creating a continuous story about I, me, mine. This voice feels so obviously you that questioning it seems absurd. But what if this constant storytelling isn't who you are at all? What if the entire sense of self is simply a story being told, and you've mistaken the character for your true nature? Watch what happens right now. A thought arises. I'm reading this. Another. What does this mean for me? Notice how thoughts automatically organize around a center, a feeling of I, who is thinking, reading, wondering. The voice takes countless fragments, sensations, emotions, memories, perceptions, and weaves them into what feels like a coherent narrative with you as the main character. It creates continuity, finds patterns, assigns meaning, and places this sense of a unified, continuous self at the center of everything. We organize our entire lives around protecting, improving, and defending this self. But what exactly are we protecting? If you pause and look, not think, but actually look, where is this self? You find thoughts, sensations, emotions, memories appearing and fading. But can you find a solid, unchanging self that owns these? Or only the voice claiming ownership, the story saying, "These are mine, this is me"? Consider something ordinary. You spend 2 weeks on vacation, genuine happiness, real joy lived day by day. Then you lose all your photos. Suddenly, despite having lived 14 days of actual experience, something feels missing. Why? Because without proof, you have no story to tell. The living itself matters less than having a narrative about it. The philosopher David Hume saw this clearly. When I enter most intimately into what I call myself, I always stumble on some particular perception of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never catch myself without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception. When he looked for this self, supposedly existing behind all experience, he found only experiences themselves. A feeling of warmth, a thought passing, an emotion rising. No self separate from these. Just a stream of experiences, with memory creating the illusion of continuity. 2,500 years before Hume, the Buddha taught exactly this in the 𝐿 Sutta. Form is like foam, feeling like a bubble, perception like a mirage, mental formations like a plantain trunk, consciousness like an illusion. A plantain tree looks solid, but peel it open and there's no core, just layers creating the appearance of solidity. The 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, work the same way. They create the appearance of a unified self. But when examined closely, there's no core self to be found. And the voice doesn't just narrate the present. It continuously reconstructs the past. Your memories aren't fixed recordings. Every time you remember, your mind rebuilds the memory, and the narrative shifts to maintain coherence with your current story. Feel like a failure today? Past events get remembered as evidence of inadequacy. Feel strong tomorrow? Those same memories surface differently. That struggle taught me resilience. Same events, different story. The Buddha pointed to this in the Dhammapada. Mind is the forerunner of all phenomena. Mind is chief. Mind-made are they. Mind doesn't passively reflect reality. Mind shapes and colors experience. And self? Self is mind's most elaborate creation. A narrative rewritten moment by moment. Why does the voice work so hard to maintain this story? Because the story has no foundation outside the telling. Watch how it operates. Success? I did this. Failure? Circumstances did this. In the Kemaka Sutta, even a deeply practiced monk confessed, I do not regard form as self, nor feeling, nor consciousness as self. Yet there still lingers in me the I am conceit, the I am desire, though I do not clearly see, this is I. Even when you see through obvious identifications, a subtle sense of I am remains, like scent lingering after the flower is gone. Why does the mind create this constant narration? There's a terror at the root. And once you see it, everything about why we cling to the story of self starts to make sense. We are, as far as we know, the only creatures who fully grasp that we're going to die. Not as abstract information, but as living reality that can hit suddenly, while brushing your teeth, driving to work, lying in bed at night. This body will stop. This mind will cease. Everything that feels so real right now will dissolve. And this knowledge creates a raw existential terror. The naked awareness that nothing lasts. There's no solid ground. We're temporary arrangements destined to disperse. To live with this moment by moment, without any psychological buffer, feels unbearable. So the mind creates a defense, a story of I that extends into the past. I was born, I grew up, I learned, and projects into the future. I will achieve, I will experience, I will continue. This narrative creates the illusion of something continuous, something stable, something that somehow transcends the raw impermanence of each moment. Arthur Schopenhauer, who engaged deeply with Buddhist ideas, described what he called the will to live, a blind force driving all existence. In his view, the sense of being an individual self serves this will's perpetuation. It creates an I who wants to continue, who fears dissolution, who organizes everything around avoiding death. But the Buddha saw something crucial. This defense mechanism becomes the very source of our deepest suffering. The structure meant to protect us becomes our prison. The story must constantly be maintained, defended, improved, protected. And since it has no real foundation, just narrative, memory, and projection stitched together, it's always vulnerable, always requiring vigilance. The Buddha didn't teach us to build better defenses. He taught the opposite. Stop running and look directly at what is. In the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, he instructs monks to observe corpses in various stages of decay, bloated, discolored, festering, reduced to bones, scattered to dust. This isn't morbid fascination. This is medicine, looking directly at what the story desperately tries to conceal. This body, too, is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. When you see this clearly, not as intellectual understanding but as direct recognition, the desperate need to maintain a story of a permanent self begins to loosen. The paradox. When the clinging to a permanent self loosens, the terror of death also loosens. Not because you stop being aware of impermanence, but because there's no longer this solid, fixed self that feels threatened by it. But we must be clear about something important. The Buddha wasn't teaching that nothing exists, that you should stop using I or pretend you're not here. He himself continued using conventional language. I will teach. Come to me, my disciples. The problem isn't the word or the convention. The problem is the clinging. The deep, unexamined belief that I refers to something real and permanent. Something that needs defending at all costs. In the Milinda Panya, a later text, King Milinda asks the elder Nagasena about a chariot. Is the wheel the chariot? No, sire. The axle? No. Then apart from all its parts, is there something called chariot? No, sire. Chariot is simply a designation, a conventional expression for parts arranged in a particular way. It's the same with self. You can say, I'm going to the store. This is my cup. I need to rest. These are useful conventions that allow us to function and communicate. The suffering comes from mistaking convention for ultimate reality. From moving from, I'm going to the store, functional, to, I am a successful person, or I am a failure. Clinging to identity, building stories that demand constant protection. In the 𝐂𝐴𝐽𝐽𝐽𝐽 Sutta, the Buddha teaches the middle way between extremes. For one who sees the origin of the world as it really is, there is no notion of non-existence in the world. For one who sees the cessation of the world as it really is, there is no notion of existence in the world. On the conventional level, we function as individuals. We make choices, bear consequences, have relationships. But ultimately, when we examine our experience precisely, no fixed, independent, permanent self-entity can be found. Just processes. Just conditions giving rise to other conditions. When we're completely identified with the story of I, what actually emerges? Two patterns appear with striking consistency. First, the narration gets caught in loops. Why am I like this? Why did this happen to me? I'll never change. Round and round, circling the same themes, telling the same story of insufficiency, victimhood, unchangeable inadequacy. This isn't problem solving. Problem solving moves toward resolution. This is the story trapped in itself, narrating the same pain over and over, deepening the groove each time. In the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha distinguishes between wise attention and what he calls unwise attention, ayoniso manasikara. Through unwise attention, unarisen mental defilements arise, and arisen defilements increase. The suffering multiplies when attention circles endlessly around I, me, mine. When the story weaves every passing thought into identity, I am anxious, not simply there's anxiety present. I am a failure, not just this particular thing didn't work. The second pattern, the story creates perpetual incompleteness. I'll be happy when I get that job. You get the job. Brief satisfaction then. I'll be happy when I get promoted. And on and on. The goalposts keep moving. The story is always about what's missing, what's not yet here, what needs to be different for I to finally be complete, finally be enough. Schopenhauer observed precisely this, how fulfillment brings only temporary relief before new desires arise to fill the void. And because there's no actual self that can be completed, just a story maintaining itself, the project never ends. The story's very existence depends on maintaining this sense of incompleteness, of being a self that needs something, that's always in the process of becoming. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha teaches about tanha, craving that takes three forms: craving for sensual pleasure, craving for existence, and craving for non-existence. Look underneath all three, and you'll find the same mechanism. The story creates a future orientation. I want pleasure. Future satisfaction will complete me. I want to become better. Future achievement will complete me. But here's the trap. Who is it that wants to become better? The I that the story creates right now. But for that I to become better, it must first be insufficient, must first be lacking. The Buddha didn't teach a path of becoming. He taught a path of seeing what's already here when the story finally falls silent. And that brings us to perhaps the most profound loss of all. The story separates us from life as it actually happens. Life occurs now, this breath, this sensation, this moment. But the story? The story is always in the past or future. I did this. I should have done that. I will do this. While life unfolds in vivid immediacy, the story runs its endless commentary. And we, identified completely with the story, miss the actual living. We miss the taste of food because we're narrating whether we should be eating this. We miss the person speaking because we're already narrating what we'll say next. The Buddha never taught the destruction of self or the suppression of thoughts. He taught something simpler and more direct. See clearly. See what's actually happening without the overlay of story. The Pali term is yathabhuta jnana dasana, knowledge and vision of things as they actually are. In the Anatalakkhana Sutta, his second discourse after enlightenment, he says, "Form is not self. If form were self, form would not lead to affliction, and one could control it. May my form be thus. May my form not be thus. But because form is not self, form leads to affliction, and one cannot have it one's way." He's pointing directly to lived experience. Look at this body. Can you control whether it gets sick, ages, feels pain? The same applies to feelings, perceptions, thoughts, consciousness. None of these are self, because when examined directly, no stable, independent essence called self can be found anywhere. This seeing must be direct, not conceptual. Consider 3 ways of meeting experience. Take anger, for example. First way, complete identification. You are the anger, lost in it completely. Second way, the story narrates, "I'm angry because he did that to me. I shouldn't be angry. What's wrong with me?" This creates layers of secondary suffering that can last for days. Third way, anger arises, and there's simple awareness that anger is present. Not "I am angry," but anger is here. Just clear recognition. The anger may still be there, perhaps quite intense. But there's no one captured by it, no one claiming it as mine. It arises like weather and passes like weather. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches, "A monk dwells contemplating the body in the body." That curious phrase, "body in body," points to something specific. Awareness resting in direct experience itself. Not I knowing my body, but simply sensations arising and passing in awareness. When the story arises, and it will arise again and again, don't fight it. Just see it as another phenomenon appearing in awareness. Let awareness rest in what's actually here before any story about it. This breath, this sensation, life happening. Now someone might ask, if there's no self, how can we truly love? How can we care for others? Look closely at what actually happens. When the story is running, helping often looks like this. I'm helping you. Look at what I'm doing. But this is exhausting. Because there's a me doing the helping, there's a me that gets tired, a me that wants recognition. But when the narration quiets, when there's no I claiming the action, something different emerges. Care arises, not from the thought, I'm being compassionate, but simply because that's what naturally happens when you're not separated from life by the story. The Buddha said, "Be islands unto yourselves, be your own refuge." And in his final words, "Decay is inherent in all conditioned things. Work out your liberation with diligence. The seeing itself becomes the refuge." Look right now. Is there actually a solid, continuous self here? Or just reading happening, understanding arising, sensations present, breathing occurring, with the story occasionally claiming, "I'm doing this," but that claim itself just another thought passing through? The Dhammapada says, "All phenomena are not self." When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. The key word is sees, not understands conceptually or believes philosophically, but sees directly, immediately. The Zen master Dogen put it simply, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. Look directly at this sense of I. Look deeply enough, clearly enough, and you forget it, not through effort or force, but through seeing that there's nothing solid there to remember in the first place. When this is seen, life simply lives itself through this body-mind. No one claiming credit. No one needing the story maintained. That is freedom. Not freedom for you, but freedom from the illusion that there was ever a separate you needing liberation. The words end here. The seeing, that's yours to live.